Jace Miller and his friends were disgusted when they saw Zaya West make the cheer squad at Warren High. To them, she was a black girl who didn't belong among their traditionally white cheerleaders. So, they tried to get rid of her the only way they knew how, by attacking. But what Jace couldn't see beneath Ja's composed silence was tactical training from her Navy SEAL father. They thought she was helpless, thought she'd crumble like all his previous victims. He was catastrophically wrong, and Zaya West was about to teach him exactly what happened when entitled bullies fatally underestimated a soldier's daughter. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The gymnasium buzzed with nervous energy as 23 girls lined up for final cheer team announcements. Zaya West stood third from the left, her hands steady at her sides despite the hammering in her chest. She'd nailed every routine, hit every mark, and smiled until her cheeks ached during 3 grueling days of tryouts. Ladies, you've all shown incredible spirit and dedication, Coach Peterson began, her clipboard held like a shield. This year's Warren High varsity cheer team will represent our school with pride and excellence. Zaya's eyes swept the gym, taking in the sea of blonde ponytails and spray tans surrounding her. She caught sight of the football team filtering in through the side doors. Their practice had just ended. Jace Miller led the pack, his quarterback's swagger evident even in sweaty practice gear. Trent Knight flanked him, thick arms crossed over his chest, while Bryce Morgan trailed behind, desperate to belong. The following girls have earned their place on this year's squad, Coach Peterson continued. She read through the list alphabetically. Each name met with squeals and embraces. Zaya West. The words hit her like lightning. She'd made it, actually made it. Around her, congratulations mixed with barely concealed surprise from some of the other girls. Zia kept her expression controlled, professional, the way her father had taught her. From across the gym, she felt eyes on her. Jace Miller was staring, his jaw tight. He leaned over to whisper something to Trent, who shook his head with disgust. Bryce just looked confused, following his friend's lead. Congratulations to our new Eagles, Coach Peterson clapped. Team meeting tomorrow, after school. We have a lot of work ahead of us before homecoming. Olu. As the celebration continued around her, Zaya gathered her gym bag and headed for the exit. The football players had positioned themselves near the doors, a convenient coincidence that made her pulse quicken. "Excuse me," she said politely, trying to pass. Jace stepped slightly to the right, not quite blocking her path, but making it clear she had to squeeze by. "So, you're the new addition to our cheer squad." "That's right." Zaya met his gaze directly. Interesting choice by Coach Peterson. Trent's voice carried just enough volume for nearby students to hear. "Very progressive. I earned my spot just like everyone else," Zaya replied evenly. Bryce shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent as Jace smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you did. It's just that our fans have certain expectations about what their cheerleaders should look like." The words hung in the air like smoke. Other students slowed their conversations, sensing tension. "And what exactly should they look like?" Zaya asked, her voice steady despite the heat building in her chest. "You know," Jace shrugged. "Traditional. The kind of girls who represent Eagle pride. Blonde hair, school spirit. The whole package. Like Barbie dolls." Zaya tilted her head slightly. Trent stepped forward. "Like girls who belong here. Girls who understand what this school is about." "I understand perfectly." Zaya adjusted her bag strap. "This school is about excellence, academics, and representing our community with pride. That's exactly what I plan to do." Jace's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "We'll see about that. Football season's a long road. Lots of games, lots of pressure. Not everyone's cut out for it. Good thing I am." She pushed past them without another word, feeling their stares burn into her back. Meanwhile, the 3 boys watched her walk away, their expressions darkening as other students filtered past them toward the parking lot. "Are you kidding me right now?" Jace's voice dropped low. meant only for his friends. They actually put her on the squad. Trent spat toward the trash can. This is exactly the kind of garbage that's ruining our school. What's next? They going to make us kneel for the anthem too, dude? What if she's one of those girls who thinks she's better than everyone? Bryce finally spoke up, his voice uncertain but trying to match their energy. Like acts all smart and stuff. Oh, she definitely thinks she's something special, Jace replied, his jaw clenched. Did you see how she looked at us? Like we were the problem. Trent's face twisted with disgust. I'm not cheering next to that. My dad's going to lose his mind when he finds out they put some diversity hire on the squad instead of Alyssa Mason. Alyssa's been waiting 2 years for this. It's not right, man. Jace shook his head. Our fans don't want to see that representing our school. They want real Eagle girls, not some— He let the sentence hang, but his meaning was clear to his friends. Bryce nodded eagerly, desperate to fit in. Yeah, exactly. Like, what are people going to think when they see our cheerleaders? This isn't that kind of school. Well, she's about to find out what kind of school this really is, Trent said, cracking his knuckles. Football season's going to be real educational for her. Jace's smile returned, cold and calculating. Oh yeah, real educational. The harassment started small, almost innocent enough to dismiss as coincidence. Monday morning, Zaya arrived at her locker to find it slightly ajar. Her combination lock hung open, and someone had rearranged her books. Nothing missing, just disturbed. She glanced around the hallway, catching Jace Miller's eye 3 lockers down. He was talking to some sophomore girl, but his attention kept drifting to Zaya. Weird, she muttered, reorganizing her textbooks. By third period, word had spread about the new cheer roster. Zaya felt the stares in every hallway, heard the whispered conversations that stopped when she passed. Some students smiled encouragingly, but others looked confused, like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Hey, Zaya! Maya Cooper, one of the senior cheerleaders, caught up with her after English class. I'm so excited you made the team. We're going to have such an amazing season. Thanks, Maya. I can't wait to get started. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong, okay? You earned this just like the rest of us. The fact that Maya felt the need to say it confirmed what Zaya already suspected. People were talking. During lunch, she sat with her usual group of friends from Honor Society when Trent Knight walked past their table. His shoulder bumped her chair hard enough to jostle her backward. Oops, he said without stopping or looking back. Sorry about that. Her friend Jessica frowned. That was weird. Trent's never that clumsy. Maybe he's having an off day, Zia replied. But she was already cataloging the incident in her mind. The real message came during 7th period study hall. Zaya pulled out her phone to check the time and found a notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged her in a post. The image was a screenshot of the school's announcement about the new cheer team with Zaya's name circled in red. The caption read, "Guess Warren's going woke now." Rip, real Eagle pride. Fran, not my cheerleader. The post had already garnered 37 likes and a handful of comments that made her stomach turn. Most were carefully worded to avoid outright slurs, but the message was crystal clear. Diversity hire much. She doesn't even look like she belongs here. There goes the neighborhood. Zaya screenshotted everything before blocking the account, which belonged to someone named Eagle Pride, 2024. Obviously fake. Her hands were shaking slightly as she put her phone away. That afternoon at cheer practice, the tension was palpable. Coach Peterson ran them through basic routines, but Zaya could feel the sideways glances from some of her teammates. Maya and a few others were genuinely welcoming, but others seemed to be waiting to see what would happen. All right, ladies, let's run through the homecoming routine one more time, Coach Peterson called out. Zaya, you'll be in the back row for now until you learn all the formations. As they lined up, Brittany Stevens, a junior with perfectly curled blonde hair, positioned herself directly in front of Zia. During the routine, she kept stepping backwards slightly, forcing Zaya to adjust her spacing. Sorry, Brittany would whisper each time. Still getting used to the new formation. By the end of practice, Jia had been stepped on twice and elbowed once during a turn sequence. All accidents, according to Brittany's apologetic smile. Walking to her car afterward, Zaya noticed the football team finishing their practice on the adjacent field. Jace Miller was deep in conversation with Coach Rivers, both of them glancing toward the parking lot where the cheerleaders were loading their gear. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How was the first practice, Warrior?" "Fine," she typed back, then deleted it. "Good. Learning the routines. Pick you up for dinner." "Want to hear all about it? I'll drive myself home. See you there." That evening, sitting across from her father at their kitchen table, Zaya picked at her grilled chicken while Commander West studied her with the intense focus that had made him an effective military leader. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "Just tired. New team, lots to learn." "Uh-huh." He set down his fork. "And how are your new teammates treating you?" Jia hesitated. Her father had taught her to be honest about threats, but she also knew his protective instincts. "Most of them are fine. There's always an adjustment period." "What about the ones who aren't fine?" She looked up sharply. "What makes you think—" "Zia." His voice carried the patience of someone who'd interrogated enemy combatants. "I didn't raise you to lie to me, especially about your safety. What's happening?" She sighed, pulling out her phone to show him the Instagram post. His expression darkened as he read through the comments. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "Anonymous posts, accidents at practice, little territorial games. They're testing you, seeing how you'll respond. So what do? Document everything. Screenshots, witnesses, times and dates. But don't react yet. Let them show their hand. And if it escalates," Commander West's smile was razor thin, "then we'll discuss your options. But for now, you stay alert and you stay smart." They picked the wrong girl to intimidate. As Zia headed upstairs to work on homework, she didn't notice the black pickup truck that had been parked across the street for the past hour, or the three figures inside watching her house with growing resentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Jace Miller was already planning his next move. The harassment escalated over the next 2 weeks like water building behind a dam. Tuesday morning, Zaya found her cheer shoes missing from her gym locker. She'd left them there after practice the night before, and now they were gone. Coach Peterson had to lend her an old pair that were 2 sizes too big. "That's strange," Maya said, frowning. "Who would take someone's shoes?" "Maybe they fell out," Brittany suggested with fake concern. "These old lockers are so unreliable." Zaya said nothing, but she noticed Jace Miller smirking at her oversized shoes during their shared chemistry class. Wednesday brought a new low. Someone had left a banana on her car windshield with a note, "Monkey see, monkey do." Zaya crumpled the paper and threw both items in the trash, but her hands shook with rage as she drove home. Thursday, she arrived at her locker to find it vandalized. Someone had scratched "Go home" into the metal door. When she reported it to Principal Mason, he sighed heavily. "I'll have maintenance look at it. But vandalism is hard to prove without witnesses," he said. "Are you sure you want to make a big deal about this? Sometimes it's better to let these things blow over." "So, I should just accept someone destroying school property because of my race?" "Now, Zia, let's not jump to conclusions about motivation. What other motivation would there be?" Principal Mason shifted uncomfortably. "I'll have a talk with some students, see what I can find out. In the meantime, maybe keep a low profile." That afternoon, the real message came during lunch. Zaya was walking past the football table when Trent Knight stuck his foot out. She stumbled, but caught herself. "Watch where you're going," he said loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "You tripped me." Trent stood up, all 6'3" of him towering over her. "You calling me a liar?" The cafeteria went quiet. Jace Miller and Bryce Morgan flanked Trent, creating a wall of Letterman jackets. "I'm saying you need to move your foot," Zaya replied evenly. "Or what?" Jace stepped forward. "You going to run crying to Daddy?" "Oh, wait. I heard he's some kind of military guy. Must be embarrassing having a daughter who can't handle high school." The words hit like a slap. Zaya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. At least my father taught me how to be a decent human being. No, Trent's face flushed red. You think you're better than us? Walking around here like you own the place? I think I belong here as much as anyone else. Bryce finally spoke up, his voice shaky but determined to impress his friends. You really don't. Several students had pulled out phones, sensing drama. Zaya realized she was outnumbered and surrounded, with dozens of cameras potentially recording her humiliation. We'll see about that, she said quietly, then walked away. Behind her, she heard Jace's voice carry across the silent cafeteria. Yeah, walk away. That's what you people do best. The phrase, you people, echoed in her head for the rest of the day. Friday brought the incident that changed everything. It was game day, and the entire school buzzed with excitement for the homecoming matchup against their rivals. Zia had finally learned the routines well enough to move up to the second row, and despite everything, she felt a genuine thrill about performing in front of the crowd. She was walking toward the gym for final preparations when she noticed the puddle. Recent rain had created a muddy depression right outside the entrance, about 3 feet wide and 6 inches deep. Most students walked around it without thinking. Zaya was texting her father about pickup arrangements when she heard footsteps behind her. She looked up just as Jace Miller grabbed her left arm. Hey, new girl, got a message for you. Before she could react, Trent Knight seized her right arm while Bryce Morgan positioned himself to block the view from the parking lot. What are you doing? Zia demanded, trying to pull free. Teaching you a lesson about knowing your place? Jace snarled. They shoved her backward toward the puddle. Zaya tried to dig her heels in, but her sneakers couldn't find purchase on the wet concrete. Stop it! She yelled loud enough that several students turned to look. Oops! Trent said as they gave her a final push. Zaya hit the muddy water hard, her uniform skirt tearing on a piece of broken concrete hidden beneath the surface. Cold, dirty water soaked through her clothes as she scrambled to get up. The 3 boys stood over her, no longer bothering to hide their satisfaction. Looks like you slipped, Jace said loudly. How clumsy! Several cheerleaders had come outside, drawn by the commotion. Maya gasped and rushed forward. Oh my God, Zia, are you okay? I'm fine, Zaya managed. But her voice cracked. Mud streaked her face and arms, and her torn uniform exposed her dignity along with her skin. Brittany Stevens pulled out her phone. This is so going on Instagram. Epic fail. Don't you dare, Maya snapped. But Zaya knew it was too late. By tonight, half the school would see her humiliation. The football players were already walking away, high-fiving each other like they'd just scored a touchdown. Nice uniform, Trent called over his shoulder. Really brings out your eyes, Jace laughed. Maybe now you'll think twice about where you belong. Zaya sat in the muddy water for another few seconds, not because she couldn't get up, but because she needed to memorize this moment. The feeling of cold mud seeping through her clothes, the sound of their laughter, the taste of humiliation in her mouth. Most importantly, the absolute certainty that this could never happen again. Maya helped her to her feet, offering tissues and apologies, but Zaya barely heard her. She was thinking about her father's voice. Sometimes you have to create your own justice when the system fails you. Tonight she would tell him everything, and tomorrow the real fight would begin. Zaya sat in her car in the school parking lot for 20 minutes after the game, still wearing her muddy, torn uniform. The Eagles had won 28-14, and she could hear celebration echoes from the field house, but the victory felt hollow. She'd watched the entire game from the sidelines in a borrowed uniform that hung loose on her frame, a constant reminder of her humiliation. Her phone buzzed with texts, some supportive from Maya and her Honor Society friends, others sharing links to social media posts that made her stomach turn. The video of her being shoved into the puddle had already been shared 43 times, with captions like, "Diversity hire gets reality check. When keeping it real goes wrong." Finally, she drove home. Commander West was waiting in the kitchen when she walked through the door, still in her stained uniform. He took one look at her and set down his coffee mug with deliberate precision. What happened? Zia had planned to ease into the conversation, maybe start with the minor incidents and work up to today. But seeing her father's controlled expression, the same look he'd worn when briefing his SEAL team before dangerous missions, she found herself telling him everything at once. 3 football players have been harassing me since I made the team: Jace Miller, Trent Knight, and Bryce Morgan. It started with comments about how I don't belong. Then missing shoes, vandalized locker, social media posts. Today they shoved me into a mud puddle in front of half the cheer squad and tore my uniform. Her father listened without interruption, his face growing progressively darker. When she finished, silence stretched between them for several heartbeats. "Show me the social media posts," he said quietly. Zia handed over her phone. Commander West scrolled through the comments, his jaw tightening with each swipe. "And the school's response? Principal Mason told me to keep a low profile and let it blow over." Something dangerous flickered in her father's eyes. "Did he now?" "Dad, I know what you're thinking, but..." "What am I thinking?" "That you want to go to the school and handle this yourself, but that'll just make things worse for me. They'll say I can't fight my own battles." Commander West studied his daughter with new respect. "You're right, but this can't continue." "I know. That's why I need you to teach me." "Teach you what?" Zia met his gaze directly. "Everything. How to defend myself, how to fight back, how to make sure this never happens again." Her father was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words. "Physical confrontation should always be the last resort, Zia. Once you cross that line, they already crossed it. They put their hands on me today." "Fair point." He leaned back in his chair. "But there are other ways to handle bullies. Strategic ways. Ways that leave them no room to claim victimhood." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're Daniel West's daughter. You're smarter than those boys. You're more disciplined. And you have something they don't." "What's that?" "Patience. And a father who spent 20 years learning how to neutralize threats." His smile was cold as winter steel. "Tell me everything you know about them. Their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. We're going to plan this like a military operation." Meanwhile, across town at Jace Miller's house, the 3 football players were celebrating their victory in more ways than one. "Did you see her face when she hit that water?" Bryce laughed, taking another drink from his stolen beer. "Priceless." "The best part was watching her try to act tough afterward," Trent added, like she wasn't completely humiliated. Jace sat back in his gaming chair, feeling satisfied. "That should send the message. She doesn't belong here, and we're not going to pretend she does." "Think she'll quit the team?" Bryce asked hopefully. "Nah," Trent shook his head. "Girls like her are stubborn. She'll probably double down, try to prove something. Then we'll have to get more creative," Jace said. "Can't have her thinking she can just ignore us. What if she tells someone, like her parents or whatever?" Bryce's voice carried a note of worry. Trent snorted. "Tell them what? That she's clumsy and fell in a puddle? We didn't do anything wrong. Just 3 guys walking to practice who happened to be near when she tripped." "Exactly," Jace agreed. "And even if she tries to make something of it, who's going to believe her over us? My dad practically built the new gymnasium. Trent's dad is on the school board. We're Eagles royalty, and she's..." He shrugged. "Not." Bryce nodded eagerly. "Plus, Coach Rivers loves us. Principal Mason isn't going to mess with the football program over some diversity cheerleader having an attitude problem." Speaking of which, Trent pulled out his phone. "Check this out." He showed them a group text thread with several other football players and their girlfriends. The video of Zia's humiliation was making the rounds with commentary that grew cruder with each share. "Tommy Walker said his girlfriend might quit the team if they don't do something about the problem," Trent reported. "Apparently, some of the girls are getting uncomfortable." "Good," Jace said. "Let them be uncomfortable. Maybe they'll pressure Coach Peterson to make some roster changes." "What if that doesn't work?" Bryce asked. Jace's expression hardened. "Then we escalate. Make her so miserable she has no choice but to transfer schools." How far are we talking?" Trent leaned forward, interested. "As far as it takes. This is our school, our team, our traditions. I'm not letting some outsider ruin what we've built here. Back at the West House, father and daughter were deep in strategic planning. The key to any successful operation is intelligence gathering, Commander West explained. You need to know your targets better than they know themselves. What motivates them? What scares them? What would hurt them most? Jace Miller is the leader, Zaya said. Star quarterback, rich family. His dad owns Miller Construction. They build half the buildings in town. Oh, vulnerabilities? He's being recruited by several colleges. Football is everything to him. Good. What about the others? Trent Knight. His father is on the school board. Trent's not as smart as Jace, but he's more violent. Scholarship kid, I think. Football is his ticket out. And the third one, Bryce Morgan, follower, not a leader. Desperate to fit in with the other two. Parents are divorced. Lives with his mom. Commander West nodded approvingly. You've been paying attention. Now, lesson 1. Never attack when your enemy expects it. They're feeling confident right now. Untouchable. That's when they make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that leave evidence. The kind that expose them for what they really are. He stood up. But first, we need to make sure you can protect yourself if this gets physical again. You mean fight training? I mean survival training. There's a difference. His expression grew serious. What happened today was just the beginning, Zaya. They're going to escalate because you didn't break. Are you prepared for that? Zaya thought about the mud, the laughter, the cameras recording her humiliation. I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Then we start tomorrow. But remember, we're not just teaching you to fight. We're teaching you to win. Saturday morning brought Zaya's first lesson in what her father called tactical awareness. They started at 6 a.m. in the basement, which Commander West had converted into a training space years ago. Punching bags hung from reinforced ceiling beams, and thick mats covered the concrete floor. Forget everything you think you know about fighting, he began, circling her slowly. Movies, television shows, video games, they're all garbage. Real combat is about efficiency, not entertainment. What do you mean? I mean you don't waste energy on fancy moves or dramatic gestures. You identify the threat, neutralize it, and get out. 3 seconds or less. He moved behind a punching bag, demonstrating throat strike to crush the windpipe, knee to the solar plexus to drop them, heel stomp to break the instep so they can't chase you. Zaya watched, memorizing the movements. But before any of that, you observe. You learn their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Sun Tzu said, "The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting." So you study them first. You study everything. Where they go, when they go there, who they talk to, what they care about. Information is power, and power is leverage. They spent the next hour drilling basic defensive moves, how to break a grab, how to create distance, how to strike effectively despite her smaller size. Zaya's muscles burned, but she pushed through the discomfort. Your advantage isn't strength, her father explained. It's speed, intelligence, and the element of surprise. They expect you to be a victim. Use that assumption against them. By 8 a.m., Zaya was exhausted but energized. Her father handed her a water bottle and a notebook. Your homework starts now. I want detailed intelligence on all 3 targets. Where they park, what routes they take between classes, who they spend time with, everything. How do I do that without being obvious? Commander West smiled. You learn to be invisible. Watch from a distance. Listen to conversations. Become part of the background, like a spy. Exactly like a spy. Monday morning, Zia began her reconnaissance mission. She arrived at school 30 minutes early, positioning herself in the library with a clear view of the student parking lot. Jace Miller pulled up in his black Dodge Challenger at exactly 7:47 a.m., parking in the same spot near the gym entrance. Trent Knight arrived 3 minutes later in a beat-up Ford truck, parking 2 rows back. Bryce Morgan came last, dropped off by his mother in a silver Honda Civic. During lunch, she sat with her back to the football table, but used her phone's camera to record their conversation patterns. Jace dominated most discussions. Trent provided aggressive commentary, and Bryce mostly laughed at inappropriate moments. Between classes, she mapped their routes. Jace took the long way to avoid crowds. Trent cut through the arts hallway where teachers rarely patrolled. Bryce followed whichever friend was closest. After 3 days of observation, she had 15 pages of notes. "Excellent work," her father said that evening, reviewing her intelligence. "Now, what have you learned about their vulnerabilities?" Jace's entire identity is built around football and his reputation. He's being recruited by State University in Alabama. Trent's family has money problems. I heard him arguing with his girlfriend about not being able to afford homecoming dinner. And Bryce, he's just desperate to belong somewhere. I'm good. Now, what would hurt each of them most? Zaya considered this. Jace would be devastated if his college prospects disappeared. Trent needs his scholarship, or he can't afford college at all. Bryce would crumble if the other two rejected him. And how might their college prospects disappear? If they got in serious trouble. Like, arrested trouble. Commander West nodded approvingly. Or if evidence surfaced of behavior that college recruiters find unacceptable. What kind of evidence? That depends on what they're hiding. Everyone has secrets, Zaya. The trick is finding them. Meanwhile, the three boys grew bolder in their harassment. Convinced that Zia's continued presence meant she was weak, they began planning something bigger than mud puddles and stolen shoes. Back at home that evening, Zaya was updating her intelligence files when her father knocked on her bedroom door. "How's the reconnaissance going?" "Good. I think I understand their dynamic now. Jace is the strategic thinker, Trent's the enforcer, and Bryce is the weak link. Weak links can be useful. They're often the first to break under pressure." "Dad." Zaya looked up from her notebook. "What if they escalate before I'm ready to fight back?" Commander West's expression grew serious. "Then you remember what I taught you about survival. You protect yourself first, worry about strategy second. But from what you've observed, what do you think their next move will be?" Zaya considered everything she'd learned about their patterns, their personalities, their motivations. "Something bigger than the puddle incident. They want me to quit, so they'll try to humiliate me in a way that can't be ignored or dismissed. Then we'd better accelerate your training. Tomorrow we start Phase 2. "What's Phase 2? Her father's smile was sharp as a blade. "Learning how to turn their strengths into weaknesses. Phase 1 targets Jace Miller," Commander West explained over breakfast Thursday morning. "He's the leader, so taking him down sends a message to the others." "How?" Her father slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of prescription bottles and a small plastic bag containing white pills. "Where did you get these?" Zaya asked, alarmed. "The nurse's office has poor security. These are expired anxiety medications that were supposed to be disposed of properly." His voice was matter-of-fact. "The bottles still have patient information, but the names have been obscured. You want me to plant drugs in his truck? I want you to create a situation where Jace Miller faces real consequences for the first time in his privileged life. College scouts don't recruit students with drug possession charges." Zaya stared at the pills, feeling the weight of the decision. "This could ruin his entire future, just like he's trying to ruin yours. The difference is you didn't start this war. But what if, Zaya?" Her father's voice was gentle but firm. "These boys shoved you into a mud puddle and humiliated you in front of your peers. They've made it clear they won't stop until you're gone. Sometimes the only way to deal with the bully is to hit them where it hurts most." She nodded slowly, tucking the folder into her backpack. Friday afternoon, Zaya waited in the parking lot after school, positioned behind a van with a clear view of Jace's Challenger. Most students had left, but football practice wouldn't start for another 30 minutes. Perfect timing. Jace's truck sat alone in the premium parking spots reserved for senior athletes. Zaya had watched him for a week and knew his routine. He always went to the weight room before practice, leaving his truck unlocked because nobody would be stupid enough to mess with it. She approached casually, as if walking to her own car parked 3 rows away. When she was sure no one was watching, she quickly opened the passenger door of the Challenger. The truck's interior smelled like expensive cologne and arrogance. Zaya slipped the prescription bottle under the passenger seat, positioning it so it would be visible to anyone who looked, but not immediately obvious. The loose pills went into the center console, scattered among spare change and old receipts. Her hands were shaking as she closed the door and walked away. 2 hours later, during football practice, an anonymous tip was called into the school's drug hotline. The caller reported suspicious activity around Jace Miller's vehicle and suggested someone should investigate before the student drove home under the influence. Principal Mason and the school resource officer, Deputy Collins, approached Jace during practice. "Miller, we need to search your vehicle," Deputy Collins announced. "What? Why?" Jace's confidence faltered for the first time since Zaya had known him. "Anonymous tip about drug activity. Probably nothing, but we have to check." Jace's teammates gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Coach Rivers jogged over from the other end of the field. "What's the problem here?" "Just a routine search, Coach. Should only take a few minutes." But it didn't take a few minutes. Deputy Collins found the prescription bottle almost immediately, and the loose pills in the console sealed Jace's fate. "Whose prescription is this?" the deputy asked, holding up the bottle with the obscured label. "I don't know. I've never seen that before in my life." Jace's voice cracked with panic. "You're saying someone planted drugs in your unlocked truck?" "Yes. I mean, maybe. I don't know how they got there." Principal Mason sighed heavily. "Jace, this is serious. These appear to be controlled substances. I'm not using drugs. Ask anyone. Test me right now. That's not the issue. Possession is possession, regardless of whether you consumed them." Coach Rivers stepped forward. "Now hold on, Principal Mason. Jace is one of our best players. There has to be some mistake." "Coach, I have to follow protocol. Jace, I'm suspending you pending investigation. Deputy Collins will handle the legal aspects." The color drained from Jace's face. "Suspended, but we have playoffs coming up. College scouts are coming to watch." "Should have thought about that before bringing these to school," Deputy Collins said, placing the evidence in a plastic bag. "This is insane! Someone's setting me up. Who would do that?" Principal Mason asked. "Jace, do you have any idea?" Jace's eyes darted around the circle of faces surrounding him. His teammates, his coaches, school officials. For the first time, he looked genuinely frightened. I don't know, but this isn't mine." From the bleachers, where she was stretching with the cheer squad, Zaya watched the scene unfold. Maya leaned over and whispered, "What do you think is happening?" "Looks like Jace is in trouble," Zaya replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Drug trouble, from what I can hear. That's crazy." "Jace doesn't seem like the type." "You never really know people," Zaya said quietly. Across the field, Jace was being led away from practice in handcuffs. Trent Knight and Bryce Morgan watched in stunned silence as their leader was placed in the back of a police cruiser. "This is messed up," Trent muttered. "Jace doesn't do that stuff." "Maybe someone really did plant them," Bryce said nervously. "Who would do that?" Bryce's eyes found Zia on the sidelines. She was going through cheer motions with the rest of the squad, seemingly oblivious to the drama unfolding on the football field. "I don't know," he said slowly. "But Jace made a lot of enemies lately." That evening, the local news reported the arrest of a star high school quarterback on possession charges. Jace's father hired an expensive lawyer within hours, but the damage was already done. State University withdrew their recruitment offer that night, and Alabama followed suit the next morning. At the West House, Zia and her father watched the news coverage over dinner. "Phase 1 complete," Commander West said quietly. "I should feel good about this," Zia said, pushing food around her plate. "But I just feel empty." "That's normal. Justice isn't always satisfying in the moment. But ask yourself this. How many other students won't be bullied because Jace Miller learned there are consequences to his actions?" Zia nodded, thinking about all the kids who might avoid the humiliation she'd endured. "What's phase 2? Trent Knight. And this time, we're going to let him destroy himself." Jace's arrest sent shockwaves through Warren High. By Monday morning, Everyone knew the star quarterback was facing serious charges and had lost his college scholarships. The football team looked shell-shocked, and Trent Knight had stepped into the leadership vacuum with barely contained rage. "This is all wrong," Trent said loudly during lunch, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "Jace doesn't do that stuff. Someone set him up." His girlfriend Alyssa rubbed his shoulder soothingly. "Maybe the charges won't stick. Maybe he'll get his scholarships back." "No way. Colleges don't take chances on players with drug records." Trent's fist clenched around his sandwich. "Someone destroyed his life, and I'm going to find out who." Zia sat 3 tables away, eating quietly while listening to every word. She could feel Trent's eyes scanning the cafeteria, looking for suspects, for someone to blame. That afternoon, Commander West reviewed the intelligence files on Trent Knight. "Family's struggling financially," he noted. "Father works construction. Mother's a part-time secretary. Trent needs that football scholarship, or he's looking at community college and student loans. So we target his scholarship chances too?" Zia asked. Her father nodded grimly. "But Trent's different from Jace. He's not entitled, he's desperate, and desperate people are more dangerous." "How? What do you mean?" "I mean, Trent's the type who will escalate to violence when cornered. We need to be very careful how we handle this." He pulled out a small vaping device and several small bags. "Your intelligence gathering paid off. Trent's been selling vapes to underclassmen behind the gym." Zia stared at the evidence. "How did you—" "I followed him yesterday after school. Watched him make 3 sales to freshman students, $50 each for devices that cost him $20 online. So, he's already breaking the law." "Exactly. We don't need to plant evidence this time. We just need to make sure the right people find out what he's already doing." Zia felt conflicted. "Dad, what if this ruins his whole future? His family really needs that scholarship money." Commander West's expression grew serious. "Zia, this is the hardest part of any operation, questioning whether your actions are justified. But remember what Trent did to you. Remember how he laughed when you were covered in mud? I know, but... And remember that he's been selling nicotine to 4-year-olds for profit. Trent Knight made his choices long before we got involved." That evening, Zia wrestled with the decision. She thought about Trent's desperation, his family's financial struggles, the way he'd looked when Jace was arrested. But then she remembered his hands grabbing her arms, his voice saying, "You people," the sound of his laughter as she sat in that mud puddle. Tuesday afternoon, she made her choice. During Trent's usual selling time behind the gym, Zia positioned herself in the nearby art building with her phone camera ready. She watched Trent complete 2 transactions with freshman boys, clearly exchanging money for vaping devices. She recorded everything. Wednesday morning, she anonymously submitted the video to Principal Mason's office, along with screenshots showing Trent's Venmo transactions with timestamps that matched the video evidence. The confrontation happened during third-period chemistry. Principal Mason and Deputy Collins pulled Trent out of class, and 20 minutes later they were searching his locker. They found 12 vaping devices, small bags of nicotine pods, and nearly $300 in cash wrapped in a rubber band. Trent's protests echoed down the hallway. "This is a setup. Someone's targeting our team. Mr. Knight, we have video evidence of you selling these devices to minors," Principal Mason replied firmly. "This isn't a setup. This is you being held accountable. You don't understand. Your family needed you to make better choices. You're suspended pending expulsion hearings. The police will handle the criminal charges for distributing nicotine products to minors." By lunch, word had spread throughout the school. Trent Knight, the linebacker being recruited by 3 state universities, was facing criminal charges and expulsion. Alyssa found Zia at her locker after school. "Did you hear about Trent?" "Yeah, it's all over school. Pretty shocking. He's saying someone set him up, that someone's targeting the football players." Alyssa studied Zia's face carefully. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" She met her gaze steadily. "Why would I know anything about Trent's illegal business?" "I don't know. It's just weird timing with Jace getting arrested and now this." Maybe they're just not as perfect as everyone thought they were. Alyssa's expression hardened. Trent's going to lose everything because of this. The words hit Zia harder than she expected. She thought about Trent's desperate face, his family's financial struggles, the ripple effects of her actions. That's really sad, she said quietly. But Trent made his own choices. As Alyssa walked away, Zia felt the weight of what she'd done. Justice, her father had said, wasn't always satisfying. Sometimes it just felt heavy, but there was still one more target to handle, and Bryce Morgan was already starting to crack under the pressure. With Jace expelled and Trent facing criminal charges, Bryce Morgan had reached his breaking point. Tuesday evening, he made the calls that would change everything. "We need to meet," he told Jace over the phone. "All three of us. I figured out who's been doing this to us." "Doing what to us?" Jace's voice was bitter from his house arrest. "Come on, Jace. You really think it's a coincidence that we all got busted right after we messed with that black cheerleader?" There was silence on the other end. "Then you think she's behind this?" "I know she is. Think about it. First, you get arrested for drugs right after we pushed her in the mud. Then Trent gets caught selling vapes. Someone's been watching us, gathering evidence. That's impossible. She's just some high school girl." Is she? You ever notice how she never fights back? How she just takes everything we do with that calm look on her face, like she's planning something? Another long pause. "Meet me at Trent's house in an hour. I'll figure out how to get there without my parents knowing." An hour later, the three boys sat in Trent's garage, their usual swagger replaced by a mixture of fear and rage. "This is insane," Trent said after Bryce laid out his theory. "You're saying some cheerleader masterminded our downfall? I'm saying someone did, and she's the only person with motive," Bryce replied. "Think about it. Who else would want to destroy us?" Jace leaned forward, his expression dark. "Even if you're right, what are we supposed to do about it? I'm under house arrest. Trent's facing charges, and you're about to be expelled. That's exactly why we need to handle this," Bryce said, his voice gaining confidence as desperation made him bold. "If she's been playing games with us, then it's time to show her what happens when you mess with the wrong people." "What are you talking about?" Trent asked. "I'm talking about ending this. We find her, corner her somewhere private, and get some answers. And then what?" Jace's voice was dangerously quiet. Bryce's eyes glittered with malice. "Then we make sure she understands that some battles aren't worth fighting." Trent nodded slowly. "I like it. She wants to play dirty. Let's show her how dirty we can get. This is our chance to take back control," Bryce continued, feeding off their growing anger. "She thinks she's smart, thinks she can destroy our lives and get away with it. Time to teach her that actions have consequences." Jace pulled out his phone. "First, we need to know where she lives. Can't corner her at school with all the cameras and witnesses." "How do we find that out?" Bryce asked. "Easy. School directory has everyone's addresses for emergency contacts." Trent grabbed his laptop. "My mom still has access to the parent portal from when she was PTA treasurer." 20 minutes later, they had what they needed. 1247 Maple Street. A quiet, residential neighborhood about 15 minutes from school. "Perfect," Jace said, studying the address on Google Street View. "Looks like a normal suburban house. Probably no security cameras. Nice and isolated." Jace stood up, his fists clenched. "This ends tonight. She thinks she can ruin our lives and just walk away. Time to show her what real consequences look like." "What if she calls the police?" Bryce asked, suddenly nervous. "She won't get the chance," Jace replied coldly. "We do this quick and clean. Get our answers, make our point, and leave." "What if her parents wake up?" Trent wondered. "Then we improvise," Jace said. "But one way or another, this stops tonight." The three boys spent the next hour planning their confrontation, driven by desperation and the dangerous logic of cornered animals. "Remember," Jace said as they prepared to leave, "we're not there to hurt her. We're there to get the truth and make sure she knows the price of crossing us." "Right," Trent agreed. "Just a conversation. A very serious conversation." Bryce nodded. trying to convince himself they weren't about to do something they'd all regret. Zaya had developed a routine of evening walks around her neighborhood, partly for exercise and partly to clear her head after the stress of the past few weeks. Her father had encouraged it, saying that maintaining normal activities was important for psychological health during operations. Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m., she set out on her usual route through the quiet suburban streets. The sun had set an hour ago, and most families were settling in for the night. Streetlights cast long shadows between the houses, and the only sounds were distant television shows and the occasional car passing on the main road. She was 3 blocks from home, walking past Riverside Park when she heard the car engine slow down behind her. Zaya's training kicked in immediately. She didn't turn around, but used her peripheral vision and the reflection in a parked car's window to assess the threat. A dark pickup truck was crawling along the curb, matching her pace. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "When you're being followed, never let them choose the location of confrontation. Either lose them or force the encounter on your terms." The park offered too many hiding spots and no witnesses. Better to stay on the street where porch lights and potential help were nearby. She picked up her pace slightly, heading toward the next intersection where she could turn back toward home. The truck's doors slammed shut behind her. "Hazia." She recognized Jace's voice immediately. Her pulse spiked, but she kept walking, pulling out her phone to call her father. "Don't even think about it." Trent's voice came from her right side. He'd circled around through the park and was now blocking her path to the intersection. Bryce appeared from behind a parked car on her left, completing the triangle. They had planned this ambush carefully. "We need to talk," Jace said, approaching from behind. "And this time, Daddy's not here to protect you." Zaya stopped walking and turned to face them, keeping all 3 in her line of sight. The nearest house was 50 yards away, and the porch light was off. No witnesses. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "We want answers," Jace replied, stepping closer. "We know you're behind everything that's happened to us. I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying!" Trent's face was flushed with anger. "First, Jace gets busted for drugs right after we teach you a lesson. Then I get caught selling vapes. You think we're stupid? I think you got yourselves in trouble and need someone to blame." Bryce's voice shook with fear and anger. "You destroyed their lives. Jace lost his scholarships. Trent's facing charges. What did we ever do to deserve this?" "Actions have consequences," Zaya replied calmly. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you put your hands on me." The words hit like a slap. Jace's expression darkened with recognition. "So, you admit it. You've been planning this whole thing. I admit that bullies eventually face justice one way or another." Trent took another step forward, his fists clenched. "Justice? You think ruining our futures is justice for some stupid prank?" "Stupid prank?" Zia's calm facade cracked slightly. "You humiliated me in front of half the school. You tore my uniform. You made me feel powerless and afraid." "Good," Jace snarled. "Maybe now you understand how we feel. The difference is, you chose to be bullies. I chose to fight back." "Well, congratulations," Trent said. "You won. We're all screwed. Happy now?" "Not yet." The admission hung in the air like a challenge. Jace's eyes narrowed dangerously. "What else do you want from us?" "I want you to understand that there are people in this world you can't intimidate. People who won't be victims just because you think they should be." Bryce stepped forward, his face twisted with desperation. "We get it, okay? You're tough. You're smart. You beat us. Can we just call it even now?" "Even?" Zaya's voice rose slightly. "You think this is even? You 3 against 1 girl, cornering me in the dark like cowards." "We're not cowards!" Trent exploded, lunging toward her. Zaya was ready. She sidestepped Trent's charge and drove her elbow into his ribs as he passed. He stumbled, gasping, and she immediately pivoted to face Jace, who was rushing her from behind. Her father's training took over completely. Strike fast, strike hard, create distance. Jace reached for her, but Zaya ducked under his arms and drove her fist into his solar plexus. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up toward his face, but he managed to twist away at the last second. Bryce tried to grab her from the side, but Zaya spun and caught his wrist, using his momentum to flip him over her hip. He hit the asphalt hard, crying out in pain. Trent had recovered and came at her again, this time more cautiously. He was bigger and stronger, but Zaya was faster and better trained. She feinted left, then struck right, her palm smashing into his nose with a sharp crack. Blood spurted as he staggered backward. Jace, still winded but furious, pulled something from his pocket. A knife. "Enough games," he gasped. "You want to play war? Let's play war." The blade gleamed under the streetlight as he advanced. Xia's mind went crystal clear, every lesson her father had taught her about weapon defense flooding back. "Jace, don't!" Bryce called out from the ground. "This is crazy!" But Jace was beyond reason, driven by desperation and rage. He lunged with the knife, aiming for her midsection. Zaya caught his wrist with both hands, using his forward momentum to redirect the blade away from her body. She twisted sharply, applying pressure to his thumb joint until he cried out and dropped the weapon. Before he could recover, she drove her knee into his stomach and followed with an uppercut that snapped his head back. Jace collapsed, semi-conscious and bleeding. 3 opponents down in less than 30 seconds. Xia stood over them, breathing hard but unhurt, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. These boys had cornered her in the dark with a knife, and she'd beaten all 3 of them. In the distance, she heard sirens approaching. Someone had called the police. Time to face the consequences. All of them. The first police cruiser arrived within 3 minutes, its flashing lights cutting through the darkness of the suburban street. Officer Mason stepped out, hand resting on her weapon as she assessed the scene. 3 teenage boys on the ground in various states of injury. 1 girl standing calmly nearby, and a knife glinting on the asphalt. "Nobody move," she commanded. "Hands where I can see them." Xia raised her hands slowly. "Officer, my name is Xia West. These 3 boys cornered me, and one of them pulled a knife. I defended myself." Trent was sitting up, blood streaming from his broken nose. "She attacked us. We were just trying to talk to her." "With a knife?" Officer Mason asked, pointing to the weapon near Jace's unconscious form. "That's not ours," Bryce protested, struggling to his feet with a grimace. "She must have planted it." A second cruiser arrived, followed quickly by an ambulance. Officer Mason's partner, Deputy Collins, began securing the scene while paramedics checked on Jace, who was groggy, coming to consciousness. "I need to call my father," Zaya said calmly. "You're not calling anyone until we sort this out," Officer Mason replied. "What happened here? They followed me from my house and cornered me. They threatened my family earlier this week, and tonight they came to make good on those threats." "That's a lie." Trent spat blood onto the sidewalk. "She's been setting us up for weeks. She got Jace arrested, got me busted for selling vapes, and now she's trying to frame us for assault." Deputy Collins looked up from where he was photographing the knife. "This matches the description of a blade stolen from Miller's garage last week. Family reported it missing." Jace's eyes went wide as he sat up against the ambulance bumper. "I didn't steal anything. Someone's been planning this." At that moment, Commander West's truck roared around the corner. He'd been monitoring police scanners and recognized his daughter's name in the dispatch. He parked quickly and approached the scene, his military bearing evident in every step. "Sir, this is a crime scene," Officer Mason warned. "That's my daughter," he replied, pulling out his ID. "Commander Daniel West, retired Navy SEAL. What's her status?" "She appears uninjured. Claims she was attacked by these 3 boys." Commander West surveyed the scene with professional eyes. 3 larger opponents down, his daughter standing calmly, a weapon that clearly didn't belong to her. Pride and concern warred in his expression. "Zaya, are you hurt?" "No, Dad. I'm fine." "Did you follow protocol?" "Yes, sir. I tried to avoid confrontation, called for help when I couldn't, and used minimum necessary force when cornered." Officer Mason frowned. "Protocol? What kind of protocol?" Self-defense training, Commander West explained. I've been teaching my daughter basic protection techniques since these boys started harassing her at school. Harassing her? How? Before Zaya could answer, Trent exploded. This is insane. She's been destroying our lives. Jace lost his college scholarships because of her. Because he brought drugs to school, Zaya replied evenly. Drugs you planted. Prove it. Deputy Collins stepped forward. We're going to need everyone to come down to the station for statements. This is a complex situation with multiple allegations. My daughter won't be answering questions without a lawyer present, Commander West said firmly. Dad, it's okay, I have nothing to hide. Jace struggled to his feet, supported by a paramedic. You hear that? She has nothing to hide because she planned everything perfectly. Planned what exactly? Officer Mason asked. Getting revenge on us for putting her in her place at school. The words hung in the air like an admission of guilt. Commander West's expression hardened. So, you admit to targeting my daughter at school? Bryce, realizing Jace's mistake, tried to backtrack. It wasn't like that. It was just normal high school stuff. Normal? Zaya's voice carried an edge of anger for the first time. Shoving me into a mud puddle and tearing my uniform in front of everyone was normal? You didn't belong on our team, Trent shouted. You never belonged at our school. Officer Mason exchanged glances with her partner. The racial undertones of the boys' statements were becoming impossible to ignore. I think we need to have some very serious conversations downtown, she said, about harassment, assault with a deadly weapon, and civil rights violations. Civil rights? Bryce's voice cracked with panic. Targeting someone because of their race is a federal crime, son, and from what I'm hearing, that's exactly what happened here. The three boys looked at each other with growing horror as the legal implications sank in. What had started as harassment over a cheer squad position was now potentially a federal hate crime investigation. Commander West placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. Officer Mason, my daughter has been documenting harassment for weeks. We have evidence of escalating threats and racial targeting. Tonight was the inevitable culmination. We'll need to see that evidence. No, you'll have it within the hour. As the boys were loaded into separate police cars, Zia finally allowed herself to breathe. The confrontation was over, but the real battle for justice was just beginning. The weeks following the arrest transformed Zaya's life in ways she never could have anticipated. What had started as a personal fight for dignity became a national conversation about bullying, racial harassment, and justice in American schools. The first major shift came when the FBI opened a federal hate crime investigation. Agent Sophia Kane arrived at the West House 3 days after the attack, her badge and serious demeanor making the stakes crystal clear. The knife attack was just the culmination, Agent Kane explained to Zia and her father in their living room. We've been building a case around the systematic harassment based on race. This goes beyond assault. It's a federal civil rights violation. I believe, Commander West nodded grimly. What do you need from us? Everything. Every text message, every social media post, every witness statement. We're going to build an airtight case that sends a message. Meanwhile, the three boys' families were scrambling to manage the crisis. Jace Miller's father hired Howard Westbrook, the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state, for $50,000. Trent Knight's family mortgaged their house to afford legal representation. Bryce Morgan's mother worked extra shifts to pay for a public defender. The media attention began with a local news report, but exploded when video of the fight surfaced. Someone's Ring doorbell camera had captured the entire confrontation, 3 large boys cornering one girl, Jace pulling a knife, and Zaya systematically defeating all 3 attackers. Teen girl fights off racist attackers, screamed the national headlines. Cable news programs ran the footage on loop. Social media exploded with support for Zaya and outrage at the boys' actions. 2 weeks after the arrest, CNN's Andrew Collins interviewed Zaya and her father in their living room. Zaya, when those 3 boys cornered you that night, what was going through your mind? Collins asked. That this was what my father had been preparing me for, Zaya replied calmly. Not the fight itself, but the moment when I had to choose between being a victim or standing up for myself. Commander West, you taught your daughter to fight. Do you have any regrets about that? Daniel West's expression was steel. My only regret is that it was necessary. But I'd rather have a daughter who can defend herself than one who suffers in silence. The interview drew 20 million viewers and sparked national debates about self-defense, parental responsibility, and systemic racism in schools. Back in Warren, the community was deeply divided. Many residents supported Zia and praised her courage. Others believed the boys were being unfairly prosecuted for typical teenage behavior. The school district found itself under federal investigation. Principal Mason was placed on administrative leave pending review of how the harassment was handled. Coach Rivers was fired immediately when investigators discovered he had been aware of the boys' behavior and failed to report it. 3 months into the legal process, plea negotiations began in earnest. The evidence was overwhelming: text messages planning the attack, social media posts full of racial slurs, witness testimony about months of harassment, and the Ring camera footage showing the assault. Jace Miller's attorney, Howard Westbrook, met with DA Rachel Cole in her office on a rainy Tuesday morning. "My client is willing to plead to simple assault," Westbrook offered. "No hate crime charges. He serves 18 months, and this all goes away quietly." Cole laughed coldly. "Your client brought a knife to attack a 16-year-old girl because of her race. We have him on video. The plea is assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations. 4 years minimum. That's his entire future. He should have considered that before he decided to terrorize a child." Westbrook tried a different approach. "What if he makes a public apology? Shows remorse? Has he shown remorse?" Westbrook was quiet for a long moment. "He's struggling with the situation. Agent Kane intercepted his jailhouse calls yesterday. He called Miss West the N-word 6 times and promised to finish the job when he gets out. Does that sound like remorse to you?" The attorney's face fell. His client's case had just become hopeless. Similar conversations played out with Trent and Bryce's lawyers. Trent's communications were full of violent fantasies about revenge. Only Bryce showed genuine remorse, writing letters of apology and participating in racial sensitivity counseling. The community pressure intensified as the trial date approached. Warren High's football program was suspended for the season. The school board held emergency meetings about new anti-harassment policies. Property values in the district began declining as families considered moving away from the negative publicity. Jace Miller's family felt the economic impact most severely. Miller Construction lost 3 major contracts when clients refused to work with the company. Jace's mother, who had worked as a real estate agent, found clients unwilling to be represented by the mother of that racist boy. Trent Knight's father was laid off from his construction job when the company decided his association with the case was bad for business. His mother increased her hours at the diner, but the family was facing bankruptcy. Bryce Morgan's divorced mother struggled most of all. As a hospital worker, she faced constant questions and judgment from colleagues. Several of Bryce's extended family members cut off contact, ashamed to be associated with the case. The boys themselves were held in separate facilities to prevent coordination of their stories. Jace, housed in the county adult lockup due to the weapons charge, quickly gained a reputation for his racist attitude and frequent disciplinary problems. Trent, in the juvenile facility, spent most of his time in protective custody after several fights with other inmates who had seen the news coverage. Bryce, also in juvenile detention, participated in counseling programs and wrote dozens of letters of apology that his lawyer hoped might influence sentencing. 6 months after the attack, the media attention had created a documentary deal, book offers, and speaking engagement requests for Zia. She turned them all down, focusing instead on her grades and her new role as student body president, a position she won in a landslide election. The plea agreements were finalized in February. Jace would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 4 years. Trent would accept 3 years for his role as primary enforcer. Bryce, with his cooperation and demonstrated remorse, would plead to 18 months in juvenile detention. The final court session took place on a cold March morning. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters, some supporting Zaya and demanding justice, others claiming the boys were being unfairly punished. Media trucks lined the street for blocks. Inside, Judge Paula Richards reviewed the case file one final time before the packed courtroom. She had served on the bench for 30 years, handling everything from white-collar fraud to murder cases, but the Warren High hate crime case had drawn more attention than anything in her career. We're here for the sentencing of defendants Miller, Knight, and Morgan, who have pled guilty to charges of assault, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations, she announced. Zaya sat beside D.A. Cole, wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Behind her, Commander West watched with military bearing, flanked by supporters from the school and community. Maya, Cooper, and several other cheerleaders had driven down to show support. Across the aisle, the three boys sat with their attorneys, their families filling the rows behind them. Jace's parents looked aged by stress and public humiliation. Trent's family appeared financially and emotionally drained. Bryce's mother wept quietly, having already lost her son to the justice system. D.A. Cole rose to deliver her final arguments. Your Honor, this case represents more than teenage bullying gone wrong. The defendants engaged in a systematic campaign of racial harassment that culminated in a premeditated assault with a deadly weapon. The evidence shows months of planning, coordination, and escalating violence driven by hatred. She opened a thick folder. Text messages between the defendants referred to Miss West as that N-word cheerleader and discuss various ways to get rid of her. Social media posts show them encouraging others to harass her. Witness testimony confirms they made her life miserable for months before the final attack. Howard Westbrook, Jace's attorney, attempted damage control. Your Honor, my clients were confused. Angry teenagers who made poor choices. They've already lost their college opportunities, their futures, their reputations. They've learned their lesson through consequences. Have they? Cole countered, pulling out transcripts. Yesterday, we intercepted jailhouse communications where Mr. Miller refers to the victim using racial slurs and promises to finish what we started upon release. Mr. Knight has made similar statements about getting revenge. The courtroom murmured with disgust. Jace's father visibly sagged in his chair, realizing his son had just sealed his own fate. Judge Richards studied the documents with growing displeasure. Mr. Miller, stand up. Jace rose shakily, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the expensive varsity jacket he had once worn with pride. In 30 years on this bench, I've seen many young people make mistakes and learn from them. But what you and your co-defendants did goes far beyond teenage error. You targeted a fellow student because of her race, escalated that harassment over months, and ultimately attacked her with a deadly weapon while making threats against her family. Westbrook tried to interrupt. Your Honor, if I may address, you may not. Judge Richards' voice cut like steel. Mr. Miller, you were the ringleader of this conspiracy. You planned the attack, brought the weapon, and led the assault. Your recent communications show no remorse, only continued racial hatred and threats of violence. Jace's legs seemed to give out slightly. Please, Your Honor, I made a mistake, multiple mistakes over months. With calculated malicious intent and clear racial animus, she consulted her sentencing guidelines. I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years supervised probation with mandatory racial sensitivity counseling. You are permanently banned from all Warren School District properties and prohibited from contacting the victim or her family. Jace's mother burst into sobs behind him. His father sat stone-faced, staring at the complete destruction of his son's future and his family's reputation. Mr. Knight, stand up. Trent rose, his hands visibly trembling. His family couldn't afford an attorney like Jace's, and his public defender looked overwhelmed by the federal attention. You were an active participant in this conspiracy. Your communications show you encouraged violence, used racial epithets repeatedly, and physically participated in the assault. 3 years state prison, 2 years probation, with the same counseling requirements and contact restrictions. Trent's knees buckled slightly. His girlfriend Alyssa, who had stood by him through the early stages, had broken up with him months ago when the jailhouse recordings became public. Mr. Morgan, Bryce could barely stand, his face pale and streaked with tears. Unlike his co-defendants, he had spent months in genuine remorse, writing letters, participating in counseling, and cooperating fully with investigators. You were the follower in this group, but you participated willingly in racial harassment and assault. However, your cooperation with the investigation, your participation in counseling programs, and your demonstrated remorse distinguish your case. 18 months in juvenile detention, followed by 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service with racial justice organizations. Bryce's mother wept with relief. 18 months was devastating, but it wasn't the years-long sentence she had feared. Judge Richards turned to address the packed courtroom. Let this case serve as a warning to every parent, every school administrator, and every young person watching. Hate crimes will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law in my jurisdiction. The defendants' futures were destroyed not by their victims' response to their attacks, but by their own choices to engage in racially motivated violence. She looked directly at Zaya. Miss West, would you like to make a victim impact statement? Zaya stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. The girl who had been shoved into a mud puddle 8 months ago was gone. In her place stood a young woman who had faced hatred and emerged stronger. I didn't want any of this to happen, she began, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the silent courtroom. I wanted to make the cheer team, get good grades, and have a normal high school experience. These defendants took that choice away from me when they decided I didn't belong in their world. She turned to face the 3 boys directly. You thought you could intimidate me into disappearing. You thought your threats and violence would make me quit and transfer schools. Instead, you taught me that standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them from hurting other people. Her voice grew stronger. I hope prison teaches you what empathy and common decency couldn't. I hope you learn that every person deserves respect, regardless of their race. And I hope that when you get out, you spend the rest of your lives making up for the hatred you've spread. Jace's eyes blazed with unrepentant fury. Trent stared at the floor in shame. Bryce looked genuinely broken by remorse and the consequences of his choices. This court is adjourned. As the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in controlled chaos. Reporters surged toward the exits to file their stories. The defendants were led away in handcuffs, their families following in various states of grief, anger, and devastation. Outside the courthouse, Zaya and her father stood on the steps as cameras flashed around them and reporters shouted questions. Miss West, how do you feel about the sentences? Called a CNN correspondent. I feel like justice was served, Zaya replied confidently. These boys learned that actions have consequences, no matter who your family is, how much money you have, or what you think you're entitled to. What message do you have for other students facing harassment? Document everything. Tell trusted adults, and remember that you have the right to defend yourself and demand justice. Commander West wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders as they prepared to leave. I'm proud of her for standing up for herself, and for every student who will never have to face what she faced because of her courage. As they walked toward their car through the crowd of supporters and media, Zaya felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she had carried for almost a year. The fight was finally over, and justice had prevailed. The real victory wasn't just the prison sentences or the vindication in court. It was the knowledge that she had faced hatred and violence with courage, intelligence, and determination, and emerged victorious. 1 year later, Zaya West stood at the podium in Warren High's newly renovated auditorium, addressing an assembly about anti-bullying and racial justice. The irony wasn't lost on her, speaking in the same school where 3 boys had once tried to destroy her for the color of her skin. A year ago, I thought my biggest challenge would be learning cheer routines, she began, her voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium. "I never imagined I'd have to fight for my right to exist in this school without harassment." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. In the front row sat Principal Walker, Mason's replacement, along with the new coaching staff and school board members. The old guard that had enabled the harassment was gone, replaced by administrators committed to creating a safer environment. "But I learned something important through all of this," Zaya continued. "Bullies only have the power you give them. When you stand up for yourself and demand justice, they lose that power." After the assembly, Maya Cooper found Zaya in the hallway. Now, team captain, Maya had helped transform the cheerleading program into one focused on inclusivity and school spirit rather than social hierarchy. "That was amazing," Maya said, beaming. "Did you see how quiet everyone got when you talked about the knife?" "They needed to hear it," Zaya replied. "Some people still think what happened to me was just boys being boys. Not anymore, they don't. Not after seeing Jace Miller on the news last week." The news coverage had been devastating for Jace's image. He'd been involved in a racial incident at the state prison, attacking a black inmate and earning additional charges. His original 4-year sentence had been extended to 7 years. The Golden Boy quarterback was now a career criminal with a white supremacist reputation. "Have you heard anything about Trent?" Maya asked. "He's been writing letters," Zaya said. "Apologizing, asking for forgiveness. My dad thinks he might actually be changing." Trent Knight had taken a different path in prison. After being beaten up by other inmates who recognized him from the news, he'd requested protective custody and begun participating in educational programs. His letters to Zaya, which she read but didn't respond to, showed genuine remorse and a growing understanding of his actions' impact. And Bryce, he gets out next month. His mom says he wants to transfer schools and start over somewhere else. Bryce Morgan had served his full 18-month sentence and completed his community service working with racial justice organizations. Unlike his former friends, he'd used his time in detention to educate himself about racism and its effects. His transformation appeared genuine, though Zaya remained cautious about trusting it. That evening, Zaya found her father in the basement gym, working out as he did every night. The space had evolved since her training began: new equipment, photos of her various achievements, and newspaper clippings documenting their victory. "How did the assembly go?" he asked, pausing his workout. "Good. Kids are listening." Some of them shared their own stories about harassment afterward. Commander West smiled with pride. "You've become quite the speaker. Harvard's going to be lucky to have you." Zaya had been accepted to Harvard with a full academic scholarship. Her essay about overcoming racial harassment and standing up for justice had impressed the admissions committee. She'd also received scholarship offers from 12 other universities, all eager to recruit the girl who'd become a symbol of courage and resilience. "I keep thinking about what you said that first night," she reflected. "About creating your own justice when the system fails. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Zaya considered the question seriously. The past year had been difficult. Death threats from white supremacist groups, constant media attention, the stress of testimony and court proceedings. But it had also brought unexpected rewards: friendship with students who admired her courage, respect from adults who'd watched her handle adversity with grace, and the knowledge that she'd helped create real change. "No," she said finally. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret fighting back." Her phone buzzed with a text from her guidance counselor. "News crew here wants interview about new anti-harassment policies. Interested?" "Another interview request," she told her father. "You don't have to keep doing them. You know you've already changed things here." "I know, but maybe one more student will see it and realize they don't have to accept being treated badly." The changes at Warren High had been comprehensive. The new administration had implemented zero-tolerance harassment policies, mandatory diversity training for all staff, and anonymous reporting systems for students. The football program had been rebuilt from scratch, with coaches who prioritized character over wins. The cheerleading squad now actively recruited from all demographics and focused on supporting the entire student body. Most significantly, the school district had hired Dr. Abigail Ford, a nationally recognized expert on racial equity and education, as Director of Student Safety and Inclusion. Her first initiative was creating peer mediation programs and restorative justice circles for addressing conflicts before they escalated. 2 weeks later, Zaya received an unexpected visitor. Bryce Morgan stood nervously on her front porch, accompanied by his mother and a social worker. He looked different, thinner, more mature, with eyes that held genuine remorse rather than the desperate fear she remembered from the trial. "Zaya, I don't expect you to forgive me," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong we were, how much we hurt you." Under two, she studied him carefully, seeing none of the arrogance or hatred that had driven him to participate in her harassment. Prison and counseling had changed him, but she remained cautious. "What do you want from me, Bryce?" "Nothing. I just wanted to take responsibility for what I did and tell you I'm sorry. Really sorry." His mother stepped forward. "I'm sorry too, Zia. I failed to raise my son with the values he needed. I'm ashamed of what he did to you." "Nay." The social worker nodded encouragingly. "Bryce has completed extensive counseling and community service. He wants to dedicate his life to preventing what happened to you from happening to other students. I'm transferring to Logan High," Bryce continued, "starting fresh, but I wanted to make sure you knew that I understand now. What we did was evil, and you had every right to fight back." Zia looked at this broken boy who had once helped destroy her uniform and humiliate her in front of her peers. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a tired acknowledgement that justice sometimes looked like this: messy, incomplete, but real. "I hope you've really learned from this, Bryce. I hope you spend the rest of your life making sure other kids never face what I faced." "I will. I promise." As they left, Zaya felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness, that would take much longer, if it ever came at all, but recognition that people could change, even after committing terrible acts. Standing in her doorway, watching Bryce Morgan walk away from her life forever, Zaya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been a girl trying to fit into a hostile environment. Now, she was a young woman who'd proven that justice was possible, even when it seemed impossible. She'd fought for her place in the world and won. More importantly, she'd made that place a little safer for everyone who came after her. The battle was over. The victory was complete. And Zaya West was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The autumn sun filtered gently through the iron gates of Harvard Yard, painting the old brick buildings in shades of amber and gold. Students hurried past with backpacks and books, voices lifted in a dozen languages, the world converging in one place of learning. Zaya West paused at the entrance, her acceptance letter folded neatly in her pocket. 1 year ago, she had stood in a courtroom, speaking for every student who had been told they did not belong. Now, she stood here, at the threshold of a future her bullies had once tried to deny her. She drew a steady breath. The air was crisp, touched with the scent of fallen leaves and the faint sweetness of coffee drifting from a nearby cafe. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a sense of responsibility. This was no longer just her journey. Every step she took carried the echoes of the fight she had already won. As she crossed the yard, a group of new classmates greeted her. They had seen her story online. Some offered shy smiles, others bold words. "You're Zaya, right? The one who fought back?" She nodded politely, but did not linger on the past. In her first lecture hall, the professor spoke about justice, quoting Frederick Douglass. "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Zaya wrote the words carefully in her notebook, feeling them settle deep inside her chest. At lunch, she called her father. Commander West's voice, steady as ever, came through the line. "How's day one, Harvard girl?" Ja smiled, her eyes glistening. "It feels like the beginning of something I've been preparing for my whole life." "Remember," he said, "you don't just belong there. You've earned every brick of that campus." When the call ended, Zaya sat alone beneath an ancient elm tree. She closed her eyes, hearing the laughter of passing students, the toll of the clock tower. The scars of last year had not vanished, but they had become part of her armor. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I survived the storm. Now it's time to build." As the bell rang for afternoon classes, Zia rose and walked across the green. Her shadow stretched long in the autumn light, not burdened but extended, touching the ground like a promise of everything still to come. The story of Warren had ended, but the story of Zia West was only beginning. The courtroom had emptied, the headlines had faded, and the years had begun their quiet work of softening sharp edges. But stories like Zia West's never truly end. They become echoes, reverberating far beyond the walls where the events first unfolded. They carry a weight that belongs not only to the one who lived it, but to every person who has ever walked through a hallway with their head down, pretending not to hear the laughter, pretending the sting of words or blows would not last. Zaya's journey is not just her own. It is the story of every student who has been told, in ways subtle or violent, "You don't belong here." It is the story of every teacher who failed to speak up when silence was easier. It is the story of every parent who looked into the eyes of their child and saw fear where there should have been joy. The lesson she leaves us with is not wrapped in triumph alone. Justice, as she discovered, is rarely clean. It does not arrive without scars, without nights of doubt, without the quiet knowledge that what has been broken can never be fully mended. But justice, imperfect though it may be, is still the flame that lights the path forward. From Zaya's fight, we learn that bullies do not simply steal peace from one child. They weaken the fabric of a community. And when a community allows harassment to grow unchecked, it teaches its children the most dangerous lesson of all: that cruelty is acceptable if done in numbers, if cloaked in tradition, or if ignored by those in power. Yet there is hope in this story too, hope forged in courage. Zia taught us that silence is not safety, that looking down will not stop the blow, and that dignity is worth defending, even when the odds feel impossible. She showed us that standing up does not always look like victory. It often looks like survival, like trembling hands raised anyway, like refusing to vanish into the margins. And perhaps most importantly, her father's wisdom reminds us that preparation is not paranoia, it is love. Teaching a child to defend themselves, whether with words, with community, or with skill, is not teaching them violence. It is teaching them they are worth protecting. That lesson may be the single most enduring gift a parent can give. But let us not mistake this story for one about heroes and villains only. The boys who tormented Zia were not born with hatred in their veins. They were shaped by silence, by prejudice, unchallenged, by families and institutions that looked away until it was too late. The tragedy is not only in what they did, but in how long they were allowed to believe it was acceptable. If there is redemption to be found, it begins with us breaking that cycle, teaching the next generation that strength is not measured in domination, but in compassion. So what should we carry with us as the final curtain falls on Zaya's story? Carry this: that every cruel word dismissed as a joke, every shove brushed aside as kids being kids, is a seed. Left unchecked, it grows into the kind of violence that destroys futures, not just of the victims, but of the aggressors themselves. If we care about the world our children will inherit, we cannot wait for another Zia to stand alone in a cafeteria, or on a cheer squad, or in a courtroom. We must build schools where cruelty finds no soil to take root, where accountability is the rule, not the exception, and where every child, no matter their race, gender, or circumstance, can believe they belong. And now, dear listener, I turn the story back to you, because this is not just entertainment, it is an invitation. What do you see in Zia's courage that speaks to your own life? Have you witnessed moments of bullying or injustice? How did you respond? And what would you do differently now? Share your thoughts below, not because the algorithm demands it, but because your words might be the spark that gives another viewer courage. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe in voices that shine light into the darker corners of our schools and our communities, then join us. Stay connected with Raw Black Stories. Subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a movement of storytelling that refuses to look away, that insists on remembering, that dares to imagine better. Because the fight against hatred is not won in one courtroom or one campus, it is won in 1,000 small choices made every day. It is won when we speak instead of staying silent, when we protect instead of turning away, when we remember that the story of one brave girl can be the story that changes us all. And so, as Ya walks forward into her future, the question remains for each of us. When the moment comes, will we stand by in silence, or will we, like her, choose to rise?